In tonight's Dorchester segment, the main stories are about politics with victories for two local candidates, Ayanna Pressley and Liz Miranda. To fill us in is the news editor of the Dorchester Reporter, Jennifer Smith. Thank you very much for being with us, Jen.
Of course, Chris.
A couple of days after the election, you got the big scoop here. You got to do what? Was this the first exclusive interview with Ayanna Pressley?
Yeah, we were right up there. We're her local paper, but also we've been covering her forever, really. She was actually the first person I ever interviewed when I started at the Dot Reporter, and she had just come off the heels of a pretty dramatic win, a pretty dramatic upset over incumbent Michael Capuano, and while she was dehydrated, she took a day off to kind of rest up after that crazy race. I did get a chance to catch up with her the day after that in her offices in Jamaica Plain.
She was often pigeonholed for appeal to women, to young voters, people of color, but your paper had an article about her appeal to some labor unions in Boston. Why was that?
Yeah, so it is true that a lot of the voters that she was counting on coming out were the younger voters, the voters of color, basically people that are not generally expected to come out and vote in a Democratic primary or in general, and they aren't often captured by a lot of polling. But she did have this one faction of support. It was relatively minimal compared to the number of unions that endorsed Michael Capuano, but one of her most prominent supporters on the union side was the Dorchester-based electricians group IBEW Local 103, just off Freeport Street. And they not only endorsed her, they were out for her in force. They gave her their huge billboard so everyone driving down Dot Ave could really see that, or along Freeport Street. They did literature drops, and their president, Lou Antonellis, actually introduced her at her victory event at their hall.
Interesting reason he gave for IBEW support. I guess they had this sort of anti-establishment feeling.
Yeah, so he's actually a newer leader. So IBEW had actually endorsed Capuano in the past, but he said that they were really looking to endorse someone that reflected the changing times as they saw them. They said Ayanna really had a fresh face and a fresh message, I guess, was really what they were going for, and they expressed a willingness as well to, in the future, be looking at more progressive candidates. Not that Capuano wasn't considered progressive, but just kind of those bringing a newer lens to Washington was something that actually appealed to the union in this case, and he has indicated that that's kind of their thinking going forward.
You also cover the woman who won the election to be the new state rep, at least the primary election, in the 5th Suffolk District. This is Dorchester and part of Roxbury. Liz Miranda, tell me about her.
Yeah, so Liz Miranda is a longtime community organizer, back from when she was a young teenager, actually. She got started with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative when she was 14, I believe. And so she really came at this with a youth-focused approach, with the idea of catering to people in the district that maybe have never actually talked to a canvasser before, areas where people assume that young people just don't come out to vote. And she, like Ayanna Pressley, actually basically based her campaign strategy around being methodical with identifying who would be most likely to vote for her, and also really making the effort to say, look, I'm trying to community build, I'm looking to movement build, and I want to bring your voice with me to the State House in Liz Miranda's case and to Congress in Ayanna Pressley's case. And Liz Miranda really did pull off an extraordinary win. It was an open seat. She was facing Darren Howell, who's another longtime political organizer, who was actually endorsed by a number of existing reps, including Russell Holmes, including former Councilor Chuck Turner. But Liz Miranda won all 20 of the precincts in the 5th Suffolk District, and some of them by a pretty impressive margin. And she credits that win in large part to just not being dismissive of certain sections of the population that weren't compelled to come out before.
It didn't hurt that she raised more money than Darren Howell, but I also noticed in that district, a lot of the precincts in the DA's race were won by Andra Carvalho, not surprisingly, but couldn't that have helped her too?
Yes, that was actually an interesting conversation that I had with her afterward, which was because Andra Carvalho was running for Suffolk DA, ultimately unsuccessfully. Rachel Rawlings won that one, and he's Cape Verdean, and there was overlap between Liz Miranda, a Cape Verdean woman, running for this seat, so a lot of their people were kind of overlapping with each other. One thing that she pointed out, which was kind of funny, is because state rep races generate relatively no interest, historically speaking, there were a lot of people that were initially worried that she was trying to unseat Andra Carvalho, and she had to explain to them, no, he's actually running for something else, and it's okay if you vote for both of us.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Jennifer Smith from the Dorchester Reporter. Jennifer, you have another story out about a recreational marijuana site. This is in Fields Corner. It's a commercial site, but it's also near some youth programs, playgrounds, and parks. So how's this going over?
Yeah, so they had kind of a tricky time reaching out initially, because when this was proposed, it was right before all of the civic organizations broke for the summer. So they kind of floated it out in the community. For context, if they're familiar with where the All Dorchester Sports and Leadership Clubhouse is, right by Fields Corner, right by the park, and a block away from the C11 station. That's where this is being proposed, right on the stretch of Dorchester Avenue. And they had reached out initially before the summer with a slightly different location, and it turned out it was a little bit too close to the nearby school. It was actually within 500 feet, which isn't allowed under the current ruling. So they found a place that was about a block and a half south that does meet all the requirements. It's at least half a mile from any other place that's looking to become a dispensary. And what they're kind of saying to begin with is they were already pre-approved for a medical marijuana location, so they have slightly higher priority when they go to the state for licensing if they're successful in the city process. But while they want to look into recreational marijuana, and is categorized as a recreational marijuana place that's being managed, by the way, by Holistic Health Group. They also have locations in Worcester as well. They basically want a recreational marijuana facility that allows for people to come in for medical reasons as well. They'd like medical marijuana to not be taxed, for instance, under those laws. And the reaction's been a little bit mixed. Just now, they're getting out to the actual kind of community meeting roundup of things. And legalizing medical marijuana passed overwhelmingly in Boston, but I mean, it's no surprise to anyone that there's still some concern over how exactly it fits into the neighborhood and any safety impacts.
Finally, you have a dangerous traffic intersection at Gallivan Boulevard in Morton Street. The state's supposed to fix it up. People have been waiting for a while for this to happen. So what's the progress report?
So at Morton Gallivan, it's a pretty dangerous stretch of road. Honestly, there was an audit in 2014 that led a lot of people to believe that there would be some movement on it a few years ago. There's really convoluted signaling, not really great crossings, and over again, the neighborhood has pointed at it as just an inherent risk to people trying to get around. And so the state did actually manage to allocate $3.5 million for doing the traffic study, but it's been dragging out. And so there's been a lot of pushback and pressure from locals, local elected officials. State Rep Dan Cullinane, who was also successful in winning re-election in this last primary, he's really been saying, look, we did everything that we could on the state level to get this funding. There's a plan already. The public meetings have already happened. There's signaling improvements, crossing improvements. There's a left turn lane that we've already approved. And we really just need this to get going. So they're planning on putting it out to bid by this fall. People are a little bit skeptical, but they're hopeful.
Briefly, also an electoral milestone for one other Dorchester resident who I guess will soon be on the city council.
Yes, so Althea Garrison, who held the 5th Suffolk seat that we talked about earlier back in the early 90s for one term after she actually won on a technicality when her opponent wasn't able to actually file his papers on time. Looks like she's heading back to office because with Ayanna Pressley going to Congress, Althea Garrison was the 5th place finisher in the at-large race, which means for the next year, starting as soon as the term begins, she's going to be in the city council for a year. Okay, for more information down the road here, you got a website, Twitter feed people should know about? Yeah, so you can find everything that we write about online at .news.com, or you can follow the paper on Twitter at .news or me at Jen.Smith. Thank you very much, Jennifer Smith from the Dorchester Reporter.